يضيق خلقك. الحمد لله ما حد بياخذ منك رزقك. هدي وارتاح ثابر واطمح من حقك، بس بلاش العين. لا 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 ما تسوى الدنيا تضيق خلقك. الحمد لله ما حد بياخذ منك رزقك. هدي وارتاح ثابر واطمح من حقك، بس بلاش العين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Muhammad Harun, and this is my sister Fatma Harun Masood. And we are here this evening to basically come and receive the lifetime award on behalf of my father, who was killed in 1965, exactly 50 years ago, in 1969. And as a result of his contribution towards the society in terms of his sacrifice, having sacrificed his life for the sake of justice, to uplift, to transform, to change this community for the better. So, of course, having been killed at that time and having memorialized his ideas in different ways, we as a family have set up the Imam Abdullah Harun Foundation. And the idea is basically just to try and make known the ideas that he stood for, the various ideas that he shared with others, and of course more specific also for people to get to know who this person was, because very few people know about his life, very few people know about the type of person he was. But having said that, I think we also need to emphasize the fact that as a foundation we have been in touch with various bodies as participants, as partners, to basically create activities to help bringing back memories about him, but also basically linking up with many other families whose relatives were also killed in detention. So in a sense, we forming a group of family members so that we can make the larger society, the national, the sort of South African and Southern African continent basically aware of the fact that there were these people who basically had been killed in detention, and they basically stood for justice. And I think we need to promote the idea of justice at all levels in our society, individual level, communal level, societal level, national level, and at the same time speak out against all sorts of corruption, sort of injustices whichever we can. So in a sense, the Imam some sort of symbolized that, and as a result of his symbolism, we felt that as a family and of course as friends, we're trying to promote the idea of working towards justice, implementing it, and hopefully achieving it. Thank you very much.
وكان الإنسان عجولا إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا وأن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما ويدع الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير وكان الإنسان عجولا وجعلنا الليل والنهار آيتين وجعلنا الليل والنهار آيتين فمحونا آية الليل وجعلنا الليل والنهار آيتين فمحونا آية الليل وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة لتبتغوا فضلا من ربكم ولتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة لتبتغوا فضلا من ربكم ولتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب وكل شيء فصلناه تفصيلا وكل إنسان ألزمناه طائره في عنقه ونخرج له يوم القيامة كتابا يلقاه منشورا وكل إنسان ألزمناه طائره في عنقه ونخرج له يوم القيامة كتابا يلقاه منشورا اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا من اهتدى فإنما يهتدي لنفسه ومن ضل فإنما يضل عليها ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى وما كنا معذبين حتى نبعث رسولا صدق الله العظيم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل ربنا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل عواقب أمورنا بالخير بيدك الخير والعافية إنك على كل شيء قدير. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Alhamdulillah, we thank Qari Hafidh Uzair Jatim for his beautiful rendition of the Quran and the recitation of the opening dua. May Allah increase you in all that is good and grant you and all of your classmates success in your studies at IPSA, insha'Allah. I now have the honor to call upon the principal of the International Peace College South Africa, IPSA, Sheikh Mohammed Ihsan Talib, to formally constitute the Convocation 2019.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. Our respected visiting guest from our fatherland, National Minister in the National Government of Malaysia, Minister of Local Trade, Mr. Saifuddin Nasir Shun, President of the Muslim Judicial Council, Sheikh Irfan Abrams, Chairperson of the Board of IPSA, Hafiz Advocate Abu Bakr Muhammad, our Honorable Keynote Speaker, the Honorable Professor Muhammad Haroon. Professor Muhammad Haroon will also be recipient of the IPSA Annual Lifetime Achievement Award, posthumously on behalf of his father, Al-Shaheed Imam Abdullah Haroon. Allow me also to acknowledge the rest of the family of Al-Shaheed Imam Abdullah Haroon present here tonight. IPSA Acting Academic Head Sheikh Dr. Dawood Tablanj, IPSA HODs, faculty and staff, graduates and diplomats of 2018 of the one-year higher certificate program and the three-year BA Islamic Studies program, our beloved and respected parents and friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. By the authority vested in me, it is my privilege and honor to hereby declare the convocation of the annual graduation of the class of 2018 open. It therefore gives me great pleasure and delight to extend our warmest and most heartfelt welcome to everyone present here in the beautiful ambience of this auditorium. We pray that the Almighty Allah confer His richest blessings and choicest mercies on this convocation.
لا 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 ما تسوى الدنيا تضيق خلقك الحمد لله تافر وضح من حقك بس
IPSA has the capacity to incubate in that direction. To the graduates, let me tell you one thing, that your certificate does not mean that you are learned already. It is simply a piece of documentary evidence indicating that you are capable of learning. Now you need to walk the talk and go out into the world and face this challenge that I have just indicated to you. Inshallah, with these words, we hope that more students will come forward and we will have to achieve this goal that we have destined for ourselves. Shukran, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I thank Advocate Abi Muhammad for his very informative presentation and with leaving our graduates with a thought of their knowledge journey that they are yet to forge ahead, inshallah. I now have the great honor of calling to the rostrum the keynote speaker for this evening, but before I do that, please allow me to inform you of his wondrous achievements. Professor Muhammad Harun, the son of Al-Marhum Al-Shahid Imam Abdullah Harun, who will be honored here this evening as well, is attached to the University of Botswana's Theology and Religious Studies Department, where he is a professor of religious studies. Professor Harun was formerly associated with the University of the Western Cape, where he taught Arabic studies, and at the University of Cape Town, where he taught Islamic studies. Currently, Professor Harun is an associate researcher at the University of Stellenbosch. He was formerly attached in the same capacity to the University of Johannesburg and Pretoria, respectively. During April and May of 2018, he was a visiting international relations professor at Rhodes University. And prior to this, he was also a visiting lecturer at UKM during the years of 1993 and 1994, at Rhodes during 2008, and Stellenbosch during 2008 as well. At present, Professor Harun edits University of Cape Town's annual review of Islam in Africa, and he too is the editor-in-chief of the Duke University's Research Africa Reviews. He authored The Dynamics of Christian-Muslim Relations and edited Going Forward South African-Malaysia Relations. He compiled South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission and annotated bibliography, and he co-edited Islamic Civilization in Southern Africa. He co-edited Muslim Higher Education in Post-Colonial Africa. He edited Enchan's Bechuanaland's Muslim Pioneers, Their Journeys and Legacies. He also authored Connecting South-South Communities, narrating the tales of South Africa-Malaysia relations, and he co-edited Proceedings of the 2016 Islamic Civilization in Southern Africa Congress. It gives me a great honor and pleasure to welcome Professor Muhammad Harun to the IPSA graduation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all, I would like to basically say a few preliminaries before I get into the gist of my presentation. My presentation is divided into basically two major sections. One is where I wish to just express my thanks and gratitude, make a few observations about IPSA, connecting it to the larger sort of educational arena within Southern Africa, and then specifically share my thoughts to our young graduates this evening. I start off by firstly expressing my thanks to IPSA's principal, Sheikh Ihsan Talib, for having extended the invitation, along with the board extending invitation to me to basically present some of my thoughts this evening. Secondly, I also want to take this opportunity of congratulating all the graduates for having reached a stage in their young lives, and each of them should view this only as a stepping stone that will contribute towards their future, but also the future of the communities that they will be serving. The second part of that is my few thoughts on the college. Firstly, let me use this platform to commend IPSA for having succeeded since 2005 in graduating a cohort of 129 students with BA degrees. That in itself, if we think back, is quite an achievement. And if we calculate the number, one would say that over this period, there was about 8 students who graduated annually, average. On the other level, of course, we have the higher certificate of Islamic Studies graduates, and over this very period, we have 786, very interestingly, 786 number of students who completed the certificate program. Don't read too much in the 786, but nonetheless, it's very interesting. Now, I comment on these partly because I want to compare these to similar or related institutions within the South African arena. We all know that within the South African arena there are, and of course we're looking at Muslim institutions, that IPSA has been, for the number of years, the only accredited Muslim institution. And last year, I was just told early on that the Medina Institute was also given accreditation. And what this basically means within the educational circles is it empowers the institution to produce graduates who will be recognized in the fields wherever they go. And that in itself is a good starting point for them and an incentive. The other issue is that when one looks at IPSA itself as an institution and compare its program, say, to the Darul Ulooms that have basically mushroomed over the past 30 years and more, one finds that it has so far made its own unique contribution. Of course, that must still be evaluated by those of us who do research in the area, but from my perspective as somebody who have been monitoring this particular area, it has stood out in its own way, and I think that's a plus. I also just want to add, and of course just say that when we think about the educational arena of Muslim contribution, yes, I was listening very carefully to our chairperson Hafiz Abu Bakr about the statistics, indeed somewhat demoralizing. But then on the other hand, one looks at the positive dimensions of all of these and say, we can make a difference, no matter how small it is. And I think that is what we are looking at. No matter how small IPSA might appear compared to your Darul Ulooms that have 300 students, 500 students, and of course the number of graduates over the years, it can still make its mark. And I think that is what it should be looking at. Let me go to the second part to my observation, is that when one reflects upon the 36 modules that the BA students have had to complete and closely assess the 3 main sets of modules, that is Arabic, Islamic Studies, and Humanities, then it reveals basically 2 things. First, the students were exposed to a variety of interrelated courses that give them a fair foundation in the body of accumulated knowledge. And the second is that the acquired information has offered, in a very competitive way, an intellectual background that hasn't been witnessed at other Muslim institutions. And I say this in a particular way from one's own understanding of other institutions with respect to them, because after all Muslim educational institutions have made their mark. When you talk about the Darul Ulooms, there is no question that when you think back of the Darul Uloom in Newcastle that Al-Marhum Maulana Qasim Sima had established, there's no doubt that it had made a vital contribution over the years. And we have benefited from these individuals. However, what one wants to see though is an element of critical thinking, which I've noted appears in the curriculum of the program of IPSA, but it should, in a sense, intensify that dimension as a way of driving critical thinking as a process of what we call muhasabah. And I'll come to that sort of in a moment. So what we would like to also then suggest is that IPSA in itself, inshallah, as we have just heard from the principal, that it will be introducing a master's program, it has an honors program, and one would say that if it opens up all of these pathways, it can indeed lead to the idea of creating multidisciplinary thinkers, so to speak. In other words, skillful thinkers, sharp thinkers, but multidisciplinary. In other words, we do not confine, but we basically open up ourselves, and that is what is important. And this is what we would like to tell our young graduates, to see themselves opening up the pathway, and this is something that we need to bear in mind.
لا 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 ما تسوى الدنيا تضيق خلقك الحمد لله تافل وضح من حقك بس
Are you with us this evening? My sister Fatima is here. My sister Shamla could not be here because she's of course in London, but her son Khalid Shamis is here. My wife Mumtaz is here. And of course my daughter-in-law Aisha is here. And Auntie Khadija's husband, so all are, and of course Fatima's husband Hanif is also around. So they are here to, of course, to witness the other event later or just after mine presentation. But why I acknowledge them partly because I think I would not have been here if it was not for their contribution in their own way. Let me sort of now divert and come to the sort of main part, and of course I'll squeeze it into the time that I have. And the subtitle of this particular presentation is From Muhasaba to Mudaraba. Now, don't confuse the idea. Of course, we know the word Mudaraba is operative within the Islamic finance sector, but we're not talking about that at all. We're talking about a partnership that is different, intellectual partnership, and that is what we would like to come to. And let me basically say the following, share the following few ideas. Setting aside the academic facts about IPSA as one of the two Muslim accredited institutions, let us quickly look at some of the ideas that we want to share with our young graduates. Firstly, to our graduates, now that each of you have reached the end of your IPSA BA program, the test, as Hafiz Abu Bakr had mentioned earlier, that each of you will encounter is not so much in having just accumulated knowledge, it's more in the post-IPSA phase, if I can call it that. This phase, you should view yourself as ambassadors or the alumni of IPSA, and that becomes a critical dimension for IPSA as an institution, but for yourselves as individuals. Secondly, the tests will not so much be in what you know or what you had accumulated. It is in the way you use the accumulated knowledge. And that becomes a test. The B part of that, the application of the body of information. How do you apply the knowledge on Quran, on Hadith, or Tafsir specifically, or on Arabic, as you move in your life? And the C part of that second point is the results that will emerge as one puts one's knowledge into action. So that is where your test comes. And of course, the test is not only between you and others, but between ourselves and our Almighty. Because after all, we will be returning with a package of information that we have, with the experience we have, and on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, we will be asked, what did we do with our time? What did we do with the knowledge that we had been taught? So it's a way of thinking through that. The third point that I want to mention and explain the previous one somewhat differently is, as one plunges into life, one will be tried and tested, as we all normally are, with the information that you and I possess, and of course as we socialize, as we interact, as we intermingle, and of course as we intellectualize with others. And here we will draw upon our experience as individuals, our position, our status in life, and of course one's common sense. So there are all of these sort of amassed together and will help us to share our understanding. Now, as one draws upon all of these, one should also start, what was mentioned earlier, to reflect. We have to reflect very carefully. We have to question. We have to inquire. We have to interrogate. We have to search. Now, all of these are packaged in the notion of muhasabah, and we'll come to that in a second. What we would like to advise our graduates to have, and us as institution, individuals should have, is a vision. We heard Hafiz Abu Bakr basically mentioning the example of the Prophet ﷺ about when he was looking into the future. And in a sense, we should ask ourselves, where do we see ourselves in the next 5 years? Will we be at IPSA again, doing the masters? Or will we be at UNISA? Are we going to go elsewhere? In other words, we need to chart out a pathway for ourselves where we have a vision and say, in 5 years' time, I would like to be there. And you work towards it. But when we chart out this vision for ourselves, we should basically then have short-term aims. In other words, what we want to do in the next year or two. Then we have to have an intermediate set of objectives. And then we should have long-term goals. Where do you want to be in 20 years' time? And this is where IPSA's teachers and staff become important mentors to you and to others, and where you can also mentor others. Sometimes when we think back ourselves, when we were in the same position, we did not have mentors as we, hear the word being sort of becoming a buzzword. And I think that becomes important. You have to look at mentors and attach you to those individuals, because they will share their experience with you, they will share their trials and tribulations with you, and they will basically guide you to move ahead. And that becomes so important. So, we link this to the whole issue of muhasabah. What we understand is, of course, we heard the Qari towards the end of the ayah, basically we talk about muhasabah, the hisab. But we more specifically want to say that when we critically reflect as individuals, we have to ask ourselves, who are we, where are we going, and how are we taking whatever we have with us into the future. So this muhasabah becomes important. So as we chart out our vision, create ways to reach those goals, those aims and objectives, we therefore have to take very seriously this idea of muhasabah. In other words, look in the mirror, ask yourself who you are, where are you going, and how are you relating to others. Of course, as I say to you these, sometimes I know my own shortcomings, and I ask myself, why have I been tested, and am I being tested in the way I am? No matter what your status, you can be a professor, double degree, double PhD degrees, 4 PhD degrees. We know of people who have 3, 4, 5 PhDs. Unbelievable, but that is what it is. But the issue is, you can accumulate all of that knowledge, but if you yourself, in terms of integrity, is questionable, that's of course another matter. And of course, in Muslim life, we know that is the fundamental and critical matter. So, that exercise of muhasabah is therefore important. But let me link this idea of muhasabah to another very somewhat awkwardly structured concept of qada wa qadar. Of course, ask yourself, how am I making this, trying to make sense of this? Sometimes we ask ourselves, or you ask yourself as, why am I at IPSA? Why couldn't I have gone to University of Western Cape or the International Islamic University of Malaysia for that matter? So it is fate. But it's part of that package of qada wa qadar that we basically have to accept. That the Almighty had pushed you into that direction. Of course, you made choices, you made decisions, and this is where you found yourself. But as we also think about our vision, and of course critically analyze our ways and in relation to others, then of course we basically also think through this notion of qada wa qadar. So it is a form of undertaking sort of critical thinking, thinking about our future, thinking about the past, and thinking about the present, and charting out ways with others in moving ahead. Let me come to the last part of sort of my presentation. Early on, Sheikh Hassan basically made mention of the fact that IPSA will be offering, inshallah, a master's degree. Of course, IPSA also offers an honors degree. And of course, encouraging some of you to consider moving up the academic stream to hopefully do the honors and then ultimately the masters. So, like we do personally, doing critical thinking about ourselves, when we do research about others and whether about our community, whether about individuals, whether about institutions, we have to undertake, or rather follow certain stages in order to basically deliver what is a fairly acceptable idea about the person or ideas about an institution, so that it's not lopsided, but at least it's balanced. And what does this basically mean then? That it is what we would say, of course in Afrikaans, some of us know, moving from scholarship to scholarship, if you get what we are saying. Sorry for those who don't understand Afrikaans, I mean, it's sort of, I underline this. Scholarship, of course, we know the word scholar means a gangster in Afrikaans, and what we say is that sometimes people go into research to make as if really they know, and they produce and they write, and when you assess it, it does not really meet up with the standards that are there, and that is your scholarship. But scholarship is much more serious. You basically pursue this with passion. You basically do this with commitment. You basically undertake this with dedication, and that is what you as young men and women should consider as you look ahead. So when we think about research, building upon the muhasaba stage of your life and moving into scholarship, as Hafiz Abu Bakr had said, I mean, let's hopefully contribute to that percentage that is so minuscule and make it more meaningful, so that people can say, despite the fact that IPSA is so small, it has made a contribution in a very sort of concrete, tangible way, and that is what we want to see. So, having said all of that, let me say this, that when we undertake our research, we have what we call the question stage or the su'al stage. And from there we go through the fikra stage, the thinking stage, or your nadriya or your theorization stage. So we have to think through these things, conceptualize them, and work towards them. And then of course, alongside that we have what is known as the Iqra stage. We heard part of the ayah saying, Iqra kitabak. And of course we also recall the very first ayah, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So in a sense we tie all of these ideas that the Almighty has guided us with into our own little lives. But this is part of that research process. And so when we have at the Iqra stage, we come to the final stage known as the tatbiq stage, application stage, or ittisal stage, where you connect ideas, where you connect the dots, as we say. And that will help us really to contribute in a very substantial way to the ideas that we need. Let me round off with a few points. We basically, just to recap, we basically said each of us must have a vision. We're talking to our young men and women. Then we basically, in the process of having that vision, we should undertake muhasabah. But at the same time, also connect this idea with the notion of qada wa qadar in our little ways. Very problematic concept, as you and I know by now, or some of you are familiar with, if you had gone to that, unpacking that concept, but it's one. And as we said, the idea of research is so critical. As a community at the Cape, or as a Muslim community, in comparison to other religious communities, we are very small numerically. But despite our numerical smallness, we do have much to contribute. So, we say the following, that consider your pathways as you move along, have that vision for yourself, but always see yourself now as graduates, as ambassadors of IPSA, wherever you go. Your first degree was at IPSA. So you take that degree and you move along and you build on. Whether you go to an institution in Indonesia, whether you go to Saudi Arabia, whether you go to Egypt, that foundation has been there to help you along. So it's a matter of always bearing that in mind. 2, in order to move ahead, and this is where I want to share with IPSA, not too long ago I was invited to be part of the International Advisory Council of ISTAC, the International Institute of Civilization, which is currently run by Professor Emeritus Datu Bakr Osman. We know he's one of the foremost Muslim philosophers in the Muslim world. And he's a respected scholar who has contributed in an enormous way to Muslim philosophy. And representing and being a member of that council and representing somewhat Africa, because I was the only person from Africa there, we basically had encouraged ISTAC to consider taking students from our communities to pursue further studies there. And of course, Professor Osman was extremely elated to basically know about these developments in our neck of the woods. And he basically encourages IPSA to basically send their best students to pursue further. And this can be done in 2 ways. One, in a partnership. Of course, IPSA has had the experience, Sheikh Hassan, you can recall that, where IPSA had a partnership with the International Islamic University. And we had a word with Professor Dhulkifli, I think is the director's name, and he basically says, from now we're going to partner with those institutions. In other words, reconnect where that connection was cut. If you recall, I think you are one of the recipients of that comparative degree between the National University of Malaysia and IPSA. And that should be reignited. So I'm sharing you with this because as a member of that board, we're basically here to say, IPSA, get back on board. So I think that will basically also be an incentive for our young men and women here who are graduating to consider moving along that path so that the degree won't just be recognized locally, but very much internationally. And of course, as we all know by now, the National Islamic University of Malaysia has really reached heights. I mean, they had prestigious vice-chancellors which has led the institution. And now ISTAC itself is being revived by Professor Osman Bakr with the hope of really taking the cream of the crop from various communities. And I think our IPSA itself should move in that direction. And hopefully, inshallah, that will be the way. Having mentioned that, let me end off by saying this. As an education institution, I think we should look at partnering. You just mentioned to me sort of moments ago as we were coming in that our friend, Professor Saleh, who is a Cape Townian, but he's been a professor at one of the universities in the States, is coming as a guest professor at IPSA. And it is this type of partnership that basically helps bringing in people with different experiences to come and contribute to our students, whether in short courses or in long courses. But I think that is the way to grow, and that is the way to stimulate our young men and women. And I think if we go through partnerships, because that is the way we will grow, because we will learn from others who have fantastic ideas or outstanding ideas, and we ourselves sometimes, let us not look down upon our own contributions. We have a good set of individuals who can make a good set of contributions. And so in that sense, let us look ourselves not as equals, but as partners who can do and transform our community in ways that sometimes we cannot imagine. But having said that, we can only do so with the help of the Almighty, with the guidance of Almighty. And so we turn to Almighty to bless us with the type of institutions that we have and individuals that we have, and only ask Almighty to enrich us further so that we can expand. But not just expand, to contribute, like our forefathers did. Sometimes when you think about Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari, Qadi Abdul Salam, Tuanguru, and others, they have contributed. That's why we are here. Their contribution, our heritage, we draw from them. And of course, then we look at my father, Rahmatullahi, who also sacrificed his life. So, iconic figures who contributed in who we are. And so in that sense, we draw from them in various ways. We take inspiration from them. Of course, we take Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as the model par excellence. Nobody can compare to our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But we, in our little ways, should work towards contributing academically, intellectually, emotionally, in different ways to a new society. In other words, to a society that will contribute towards the transformation in its small way to the larger national society in South Africa. With these words, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لا 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 ما تسوى الدنيا تضيق خلقك، الحمد لله ما حد بياخذ منك رزقك، هدي وارتاح ثابر واطمح من حقك، بس بلاش العين. لا 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 ما تسوى الدنيا تضيق خلقك، الحمد لله ما حد بياخذ منك رزقك، هدي وارتاح ثابر واطمح من حقك.